She grew up believing blood meant protection, especially when the house felt divided. Her older sister was praised loudly, while she learned to survive quietly. Family dinners carried invisible rules, where speaking less meant staying safer. She became dependable early, fixing problems no one wanted to acknowledge. Trust followed her everywhere, because she never asked for anything back. Her sister watched this silently, smiling, storing every comparison like ammunition. Success arrived slowly through discipline, not charm, not shortcuts, not favoritism. The family business relied on her accuracy, patience, and unshakable sense of order. Mistakes were rare, yet scrutiny followed her more than it ever followed others. Love felt conditional, measured by usefulness rather than understanding. The accusation arrived without warning, whispered first, then repeated with confidence. Numbers were questioned, signatures examined, conversations suddenly remembered incorrectly. Her sister cried convincingly, claiming betrayal with trembling hands and practiced shock. Parents hesitated, choosing comfort over conflict, silence over painful investigation. Friends avoided eye contact, afraid proximity could stain their own reputations. Meetings became interrogations, every answer treated as potential evidence. She searched memories desperately, trying to locate the moment reality shifted. No one asked how she felt, only whether she could explain discrepancies. Truth sounded defensive when fear controlled the room. Trust evaporated faster than she could speak. At night, she replayed conversations, noticing glances she once ignored. Her sister's kindness now appeared strategic, perfectly timed, carefully observed. Documents she had organized for years suddenly looked unfamiliar to everyone else. The weight of suspicion pressed harder than any proven wrongdoing ever could. She offered transparency, passwords, records, anything to slow the collapse. Each gesture was interpreted as guilt disguised by cooperation. Loneliness grew inside crowded rooms filled with people she loved. Her name, once respected, became a cautionary example, spoken quietly. Sleep abandoned her, replaced by calculations of consequences she never caused. The world narrowed into corridors of doubt and whispers. When the final decision came, it felt rehearsed, almost mercifully brief. Responsibility was assigned without proof, certainty replacing curiosity. She was asked to leave quietly, to protect the family image. Her sister avoided her eyes, already standing where she once belonged. Keys were returned, access revoked, years of loyalty reduced to suspicion. Outside, the air felt unfamiliar, like a city she no longer knew. She realized innocence offered no shield against a convincing lie. Everything she built collapsed without a single witness defending her. Pain settled deeper because the betrayal shared her own last name. This was only the beginning of what she would lose. She returned home, carrying silence heavier than any suitcase she owned. Family photos stared back at her like evidence from a life already rewritten. Her phone stayed quiet, messages unsent, explanations no longer requested. Every familiar room now felt like borrowed space waiting to be reclaimed. Her sister's laughter echoed from memory, rehearsed innocence layered over intent. She wondered how long the lie had been growing beside her unnoticed. Love became something fragile, easily redirected by fear and convenience. She sat alone, replaying loyalty like a mistake she never should have made. No apology arrived, only distance disguised as concern. The house no longer recognized her presence. Days passed without routine, time stretching without purpose or validation. Bills arrived faster than opportunities, pressure replacing dignity quickly. Former colleagues avoided her name, pretending confusion instead of choosing sides. Online searches connected her identity permanently to allegations she never committed. She tried correcting records, but systems favored accusation over correction. Each attempt to defend herself reopened wounds instead of closing them. Her sister posted smiling photos, thriving inside the role she stole. The contrast felt deliberate, almost theatrical in its cruelty. Shame crept in quietly, questioning her own memory of events. Reality felt unstable, rewritten by repetition rather than truth. One afternoon, her parents finally spoke, choosing distance framed as neutrality. They suggested time would soften things, as if lies aged into forgiveness. Their voices carried exhaustion, not certainty, which hurt more than anger. She realized family unity mattered more than individual justice. The call ended politely, leaving an echo of finality behind. In that moment, something inside her closed permanently. She stopped asking to be understood and started observing carefully instead. Pain sharpened into clarity when hope finally dissolved. She accepted that no one was coming to save her. Survival would require reinvention, not explanation. That night, she packed only what could not be replaced. Documents, notebooks, fragments of proof others dismissed too quickly. She erased her online presence piece by piece, preparing to disappear. Leaving felt less like running and more like refusing erasure. At the door, she paused, realizing return would someday be necessary, not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, but for truth. The lie had taken her name, but not her mind. She stepped into anonymity with nothing left to lose. The world believed a story that wasn't finished yet, and she intended to write the ending herself. Years passed without ceremony, marked only by quiet endurance and forgotten birthdays. She drifted between cities, learning how invisibility protects more than exposure ever did. Jobs came and went, none asking questions, all demanding silence and efficiency. Her name became something she rarely spoke, like a language she no longer trusted. At night, she studied patterns, systems, and how truth gets buried beneath repetition. Pain matured into discipline, stripping emotion from observation and memory. She learned that lies survive because they are convenient, not because they are strong. Every setback taught her how institutions reward confidence over accuracy. The world moved on, convinced her story had already ended. She watched from the margins, waiting for the right moment to return. The past resurfaced unexpectedly through an article shared without much attention. Her sister was praised publicly for integrity, leadership, and resilience. The headline celebrated survival after betrayal, rewriting history with elegant cruelty. Comments echoed admiration, repeating a version of events she barely recognized. She read every line slowly, noting inconsistencies others ignored. Dates conflicted, details shifted, and certainty sounded rehearsed rather than proven. For the first time, anger felt useful instead of consuming. The lie had grown comfortable, expanding without resistance. She realized comfort always breeds carelessness, and carelessness leaves traces behind. She began reconstructing timelines with precision and emotional distance. Old records resurfaced through patient requests and forgotten backups. She compared versions of stories told years apart, noting subtle contradictions. Truth emerged not as a single revelation, but as a pattern of fractures. Her sister's success relied on silence more than strength. People who once doubted her now depended on the false narrative. She documented everything methodically, never rushing conclusions. This was no longer about clearing her name privately. The damage had been public, so truth would need witnesses. She understood now what kind of return was required. The decision to come back felt heavy, deliberate, and irreversible. She would not plead, accuse, or demand sympathy from anyone. Facts would speak without emotion, one connection at a time. She prepared for resistance, denial, and the rewriting of motives. Revenge offered satisfaction, but justice required restraint. Her sister had built a kingdom on omission and fear. She would dismantle it using patience and precision. This was not a comeback fueled by anger alone. It was a correction long overdue, and it would begin when no one expected it. The return began with subtle contact, never announcing intention or identity. She re-entered familiar spaces as a consultant, a researcher, a temporary solution. No one recognized her face, only the efficiency she delivered without questions. Organizations welcomed her quietly, grateful for competence without curiosity. She listened more than she spoke, allowing people to reveal themselves naturally. Old names surfaced in conversations, spoken carelessly, stripped of past caution. Her sister's influence appeared everywhere, shaping decisions without direct involvement. Power, she learned, leaves fingerprints even when it hides behind others. The deeper she moved, the clearer the architecture of the lie became. Everything rested on a single, unchallenged assumption. She witnessed systems bending truth to protect stability and reputation. Records were adjusted subtly, never erased, only softened by interpretation. People remembered events differently when success depended on selective memory. Her sister's narrative had become institutional, repeated until questioning felt disruptive. Those who knew fragments of the truth chose silence over consequence. She realized how easily morality dissolves inside shared benefit. The lie no longer belonged to one person alone. It had become a collective agreement to look away, and dismantling it would threaten more than a single career. It would expose everyone who benefited from its survival. Pressure mounted quietly as her findings reached sensitive intersections. Requests for clarification were met with defensiveness disguised as politeness. Meetings grew shorter, emails more carefully worded, access slightly restricted. Someone had noticed patterns forming where none should exist. She sensed scrutiny returning, familiar and unwelcome. The same unease from years earlier crept back into her chest. But this time, fear did not paralyze her focus. She anticipated obstruction and documented every deviation carefully. The system responded exactly as it always did under threat. By protecting itself, it revealed its weakness. When her contract ended abruptly, the message was unmistakable. She was thanked for her contribution and quietly removed from circulation. Once again, exclusion arrived without explanation or confrontation. The pattern repeated, confirming everything she suspected. Her sister's network moved faster than she anticipated. For a moment, the weight of isolation returned sharply. She stood again at the edge, nearly erased by coordinated silence. But this time, she had something she lacked before. Proof no longer lived only in her memory. And walking away now would only preserve the lie. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story. She disappeared again, but this time with direction instead of despair. The setback clarified her strategy rather than dismantling her resolve. She understood now that direct exposure invited premature resistance. Transformation required patience, distance, and a different kind of leverage. She stopped chasing institutions and started studying individuals instead. People carried truth more carelessly than systems ever would. Every conversation became data, every hesitation a potential opening. She learned how power actually moved, quietly and informally. Knowledge replaced anger as her primary fuel. This version of her was no longer reactive. She invested years refining skills that left no visible trail. Legal frameworks, financial forensics, behavioral analysis became second nature. She learned how narratives collapse when timing is precise. Truth delivered too early is dismissed, too late is buried. She trained herself to recognize the exact moment credibility shifts. Transformation happened internally, long before anyone noticed externally. Her identity became flexible, adaptable, immune to attachment. She no longer needed validation from the past. Her sister existed now only as a variable in a larger equation. Emotion finally submitted to discipline. Quiet allies emerged without her ever asking for loyalty. Former employees, overlooked partners, people discarded once usefulness expired. Each carried a fragment of the same story told differently. She listened without interrupting, letting patterns reveal themselves. Trust rebuilt slowly, grounded in shared experience rather than promises. She offered nothing but clarity and protection in return. Together they reconstructed events with surgical precision. What once felt isolated now formed a complete structure. The truth gained weight when held collectively. She realized she was no longer alone. Preparation replaced waiting as her dominant state of being. Every detail was cataloged, verified, and cross-referenced repeatedly. She rehearsed outcomes without attachment to emotional satisfaction. Justice, she learned, demands restraint more than courage. She accepted that recognition might never arrive personally. Restoring truth mattered more than reclaiming admiration. Her return would not be dramatic or loud. It would be undeniable. The moment approached quietly, like certainty settling into place, and she was finally ready to be seen again. She re-entered the world under her own name, no longer hiding behind borrowed identities. The timing felt deliberate, chosen after years of restraint and observation. Her presence alone unsettled those who believed the past was sealed. Whispers resurfaced, curiosity replacing certainty for the first time in years. She spoke calmly, never correcting rumors, allowing discomfort to grow naturally. Silence became her advantage, forcing others to fill gaps carelessly. People began revisiting memories they once accepted without question. Doubt spread quietly, carried by repetition rather than accusation. The lie weakened as confidence around it eroded. She watched patiently, knowing momentum had shifted. She initiated conversations framed as clarification, not confrontation or accusation. Questions were precise, supported by dates, documents, and neutral language. Each inquiry exposed inconsistencies without revealing her full position. Those involved felt compelled to explain rather than deny outright. Explanations conflicted when repeated across different settings. She documented every variation, letting contradiction speak for itself. What once appeared unified began to fracture under minimal pressure. Truth does not require persuasion when comparison is allowed. Her restraint forced honesty into uncomfortable daylight. Control slipped from those who depended on silence. Media interest followed quietly, attracted by anomalies rather than scandal. Independent voices noticed patterns no one had connected before. She provided information only when asked, never pushing narrative. Transparency replaced emotion as her guiding principle. Her sister remained silent publicly, choosing dignity over engagement. That silence drew more attention than denial ever could. Absence of response created space for speculation to grow. The story regained complexity, no longer simplified into hero and villain. Public memory proved less fixed than institutions assumed. Momentum built without her ever raising her voice. She prepared for the final exposure without expectation of reconciliation. Justice was no longer personal, it had become structural. Her goal was correction, not humiliation or emotional closure. She accepted that truth often arrives without apology. The outcome mattered less than permanence of record. Once established, facts would outlive reputation management. Her sister's world depended on perception, remaining static. That stability no longer existed. Everything was aligned now, waiting for confirmation rather than proof. The transformation was complete, and nothing could reverse it. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story. The confirmation arrived during a public review no one expected to matter. Documents were presented casually, embedded among routine disclosures and audits. A single discrepancy triggered questions that could no longer be redirected. Dates failed to align. Signatures contradicted prior sworn statements. What seemed minor forced deeper examination by independent authorities. Her sister's narrative faced scrutiny without warning or preparation. Confidence faltered where certainty once lived comfortably. Explanations sounded rehearsed, then revised, then quietly withdrawn. Each correction amplified attention rather than resolving concern. The lie finally faced an audience that demanded coherence. Investigations expanded methodically, following procedure rather than emotion. Records once dismissed resurfaced with new relevance and context. Witnesses remembered details differently when protection no longer felt guaranteed. Silence dissolved as accountability replaced convenience. Her sister appeared composed publicly, but control slipped privately. Allies distanced themselves, choosing caution over association. Support built on advantage collapsed faster than expected. Facts accumulated patiently, immune to charm or reputation. Truth advanced without accusation, driven by verification alone. There was no single dramatic revelation, only inevitability. When the conclusion arrived, it felt strangely quiet. Responsibility was reassigned, not debated, supported by undeniable sequence. Statements were amended, acknowledgments issued without names spoken aloud. Her sister's image fractured subtly, then permanently. Public trust withdrew without spectacle or celebration. The narrative reversed, not through revenge, but correction. Her name re-entered records with neutrality restored. No apology followed, only revised history documented permanently. Justice rarely satisfies emotionally, but it stabilizes reality. The balance shifted where it mattered most. She did not attend the final announcement in person. Distance allowed clarity without reopening wounds unnecessarily. Her role remained minimal, intentional, and sufficient. Recognition was secondary to closure she could finally accept. The truth stood independently now, requiring no defense. She reclaimed her identity without reclaiming the past. Some victories arrive without applause or reconciliation. Justice completed its work without asking permission. She stepped forward, no longer framed by anyone else's story, and the lie ended where it began, exposed by its own weight. She watched the aftermath from a distance, where emotions no longer distorted perspective. The world adjusted slowly, recalibrating assumptions it once defended without question. Her sister withdrew from public view, not defeated, but permanently revealed. Silence replaced the confidence that once fueled every carefully crafted appearance. People spoke more cautiously now, aware of how easily certainty can mislead. The truth settled into records, articles, and institutional memory without resistance. Nothing dramatic followed, only an irreversible correction of reality. That permanence mattered more than any public apology ever could. The story closed itself, indifferent to unresolved feelings. Justice does not linger once its work is done. She returned to an ordinary life, shaped by extraordinary restraint. No interviews followed, no memoirs promised, no explanations demanded. Freedom arrived quietly, without celebration or validation from others. She rebuilt on her own terms, guided by clarity instead of bitterness. The past remained intact, but no longer controlled the present. Her name existed again without distortion or suspicion attached. What she lost could not be recovered, but it no longer defined her. Peace emerged not from forgiveness, but from accuracy restored. She accepted that some endings offer balance, not happiness, and that balance was enough. Occasionally, she encountered people who recognized her story belatedly. Their expressions carried regret mixed with admiration and discomfort. She responded kindly, without reopening doors she had already closed. Understanding, she learned, often arrives after it is no longer needed. She owed no one access to her healing process. Boundaries replaced explanations as her final act of self-respect. The lie no longer followed her into new rooms. She moved forward unburdened by the need to be believed. Truth had done its work independently. Her presence no longer required defense. In the end, she did not destroy anything out of spite. She dismantled a falsehood by refusing to carry it any longer. The lie collapsed under its own contradictions and careless confidence. Her return was never about revenge, only restoration. What remained was not victory, but alignment between fact and memory. She reclaimed her story without rewriting anyone else's. Some justice arrives quietly, leaving no spectacle behind. Only the certainty that truth, when patient, is unavoidable. She walked away whole, unframed, and finally free. The story ended not with noise, but with accuracy restored.